Wanted to tell you guys about the time I needed a blood transfusion and didn't get one. It's amazing. Everything that can go wrong in a Jehovah's Witness life, it went wrong in mine. So get used to it. But it's actually, I wish I could tell you I was in a very manly, I wish I had a more macho story to tell you than this, but my accident was I fell through the window of my little sister's playhouse. I was in the backyard and I had a Nerf football that I was throwing up and down in the air, and I would throw it up in the air and run around and catch it. And because I was looking at the sky, I wasn't looking where I was going, and I threw the football up in the air, and I was running and I stumbled and I fell forwards to my sister's playhouse that my dad had built for her, and it had a plate glass window at the time. Windows they have now, you break them and they shatter into 1,000 pieces, and you can even pick the pieces up in your hand. It's not going to cut you. But in the old days, when you broke through a plate glass window, it was like knives. And a shard of glass cut my little arm. In fact, it went all the way through my arm. It severed my tendons and cut both of the arteries in my arm. And it was actually, even though it sounds like a silly accident, it was actually a very serious injury. And I was 10 years old and I had lost pints of blood. It was a very deadly accident, and I was rushed to the hospital, and the emergency workers told my parents that I needed a blood transfusion right away. Of course, our family was Jehovah's Witnesses. This was an immediate problem, and the Watchtower people were, on the scene, and of course my parents said no blood transfusion. And what if you don't know, Jehovah's Witnesses will send a large group of people in a scenario like this. They will send Watchtower thugs, is what I call them, to the hospital because a parent's heart can give way. A person can, in a time like that where they're the natural inclination of a parent is to, do what the doctor is advising, and the Watchtower people came to the hospital, and of course, mind you, I'm in an operating room. I wasn't there for any of this, but the doctors did tell my parents that I needed a blood transfusion or I was not going to survive, because I had lost half the blood in my little body. And parents, because they were Jehovah's Witnesses, I'm not angry at my parents, of course not. I never have been, not for 1 minute, because I know my parents. They believed what all Jehovah's Witnesses believe, that by not giving a blood transfusion to your child, you're saving the child's life. Because if they for some reason, it's a prickly point for Jehovah's Witnesses. They believe if you get even a little bit of blood in your body, you are damned. Blood transfusions have been forced on Jehovah's Witnesses in the past, and those Jehovah's Witnesses were treated as, people shake their heads and say, oh no. For some reason, that is the unforgivable sin, and I can't tell you why. It seems to be a fluke thing that Jehovah's Witnesses just can't get over. But The I Thankfully the doctors were wonderful and they did microsurgery and got me fixed up. The plan B was a saline solution, an alternative to blood. It was, to be honest with you, it was not expected that I was going to survive. And in fact, the congregation had already made funeral arrangements for me. They had started the process, but and I was in the hospital for a long time, but I did pull through. And actually for a short time was, kids in that situation almost have a mini celebrity. Especially, and it was a big deal for our district because, of course, doctors wanted to give a Jehovah's Witness child blood transfusion, and the parents said no, and what do you know? The kid didn't need a blood transfusion to live after all. But the reason I'm telling you this story is not about blood transfusions. It's a topic that's been well covered. I have nothing to add to that topic. Here's the rub. This story isn't about blood transfusions. It's about lies. Jehovah's Witnesses are liars. The story was that it was my decision not to accept a blood transfusion. And what I will tell you is this. At 10 years old, now, of course, I knew that blood was a bad thing, and Jehovah's Witnesses are supposed to. I can't remember exactly what I thought, but I can tell you at 10 years old, I did not understand what a blood transfusion is, or the reality that people need in emergency situations would need blood transfusions to live. I can assure you of that. I didn't understand that this is a life and death issue. Plus, of course, at 10 years old, you can't decide you don't have the right to decide what you're going to have for lunch or decide what shoes or clothes you're going to wear to school. 10-year-olds don't make their own decisions. It's ridiculous to even put that out there. That's only adults can make life and death decisions like that, and the decision was made for me. However, the story that was told and it was told again and again. I remember they wanted me to be on district convention parts. I didn't want to. I was actually a shy kid. I was quiet. They wanted me to be in a part. I said no. But my mother was actually on a district convention part in the early 90s where she talked about what had happened a couple of years before, and I remember sitting in the audience, and I remember people, you go with it because, first of all, being a Jehovah's Witness kid, I thought my parents had helped me because I was glad I didn't get a blood transfusion because it would have made Jehovah angry. I didn't think anything of it. And people, they pat you on the back, and people give you a little hug. You're a little boy. I was cute back then. A little bow tie. So gay. But the truth is, the reality is, I didn't refuse a blood transfusion, but that's the story that was told. And even my mom went along with that story. Everyone else did too. That I told the doctors, no blood. I don't want to disobey Jehovah. And I'm giving you testimony here. This is a record here for anyone who wants to know. This is matter of public record. It's a lie. Because I have no memory of my accident, for one thing. When you're that small and you lose that much blood, you go into shock. And you lose all senses. I was unconscious for 2.5 days. The idea that I had a conversation with a doctor and refused a blood transfusion is patently ridiculous. If somebody's going to tell you that story, you can dismiss it offhand because I didn't wake up until almost 3 days later. I was I really have no memory of any of that. But what I can tell you is I did not refuse any blood transfusions. And the purpose of this video is to not to talk about an incident like this that is neither here nor there, but a reminder that Jehovah's Witnesses are liars. I fell forwards to my sister's playhouse that my dad had built for her, and it had I would throw it up in the air and run around and catch it. And because I was looking at the sky, I wasn't looking where I was going, and I threw the football up in the air, and I was running and I stumbled, and I wanted to tell you guys about the time I needed a blood transfusion and didn't get one. It's amazing. Everything that can go wrong in a Jehovah's Witness life, it went wrong in mine. So get used to it. I fell through the window of my little sister's playhouse. I was in the backyard and I had a Nerf football that I was throwing up and down in the air, and it's actually, I wish I could tell you I was in a very manly, I wish I had a more macho story to tell you than this, but my accident was